Alright, gents, the purpose of today's flight is a familiarization flight. That is an overview of all the visual references that you'll need as a pilot operating in the AO. I highly recommend that you do this familiarization flight for yourself, but for now I'm going to guide you through it. So we're going to be taking off from Sde Dov. It's the airbase that the UAF is based out of. You'll note that the 020 glide slope, which is what I'm actually facing right now. I'm not taking off from 020, but that's where you would be heading in from 020. It has some factories that are partially obstructing the glide slope, and that will be the direction by which we're usually landing from the south. Altitude, and then we'll spin around and we'll visually study our airbase. But for now, I just want to talk about the biggest, most important visual reference in the entire theater, which is the ocean. The ocean represents safety. Okay, if you're ever lost and you don't know where Israel is, or you get separated from your wingman, flow to the ocean and then head south. It'll always bring you back to Israel. We're going to head parallel to the coast, and then we'll go over sort of what we're seeing here. So that's our airbase, Sde Dov. You can see it has some prominent references.
2 airborne.
First of which is this large white sort of soccer stadium to the south. There's also all this industrial buildings and factories and stuff leading up to it, including the prominent one that's in the 020 flight path. To the east of the airbase, in this green strip here, this is Israel. This is Israel proper. And east of that is the West Bank, which is part of Israel as well. Beyond that to the east is the River Jordan, the Jordan River Valley, and then Jordan. So, but most of the time you're going to be flying along this axis and headed northeast towards the Sea of Galilee. So again, we'll see here the coast, the ocean. This is your main visual reference. Let's look at the airbase from the north. You can see there the two brown factory buildings on the south side for the 020 glide slope. You can see here that this green area, part of Israel, it's very narrow. I would say it's probably about 10 miles wide between the coast and the West Bank. Accordingly, it's very easy to find your way back to the airbase because you can just sort of find that green area and then reference the coast. So we're going to be heading
2 in position.
We're going to be heading northeast, and we're going to start to pick out some visual references that are very important to know. Again, to the east here, this splotch of like sort of deserty hills, that's all the West Bank. If you kept going east, you'd get to Jordan, which is a neutral country in the campaign. Get a little bit higher. This ridge here is called Mount Carmel. Sort of like a green ridge leading towards the northeast. And again, this will be the pretty standard ingress route for most of the missions. Overlooking the West Bank there to our 3 o'clock. So you might notice on the north side of Mount Carmel there is a very large urban sprawl in sort of a peninsula. That's called Haifa, and that's the largest northern Israeli city. What we'll be coming up on now very shortly is Ramat David, which is our standard abort field. I'm just going to offset to the right of it, to the east of it, so that we can see it better from altitude. It's identified by a very prominent circular sort of farm center there. See that on the east side? Then if you look to the south, you'll see the airbase itself. It also has on the west side of that, or disregard, on the south side of that, it has an inactive runway that sort of has been neglected for many years. Don't confuse that with an active runway and try to land on it. You'll probably have a bad day. But at this point, you know, we've only been airborne for like 5 minutes, and it's very likely that at this point we'd start to run into bandits. It takes that long. It's very, very quick to get to the AO. And again, let's just very carefully study Ramat David, because this is our abort. Again, you have the circular farm center there, urban center there, and then to the south you have these 2 runways and a very prominent sort of hangar section with multiple helipads. And if we look to the west, we see that urban sprawl there on the coast and that little peninsula. That's Haifa. Haifa has many air defenses and it's very prominent. So if you see Haifa, flow to it, then head south. Again, this green ridge, prominent ridge leading up to Haifa, Mount Carmel. Now, coming up on our nose here is arguably the most important reference, so please listen. Actually, I'm going to pause here for a second. Up on our nose is the Sea of Galilee, also known as Lake Tiberias. This is right along the Flot. Okay, it's very important that you're able to visually identify the Sea of Galilee. And running from it to the south here is, you'll see there's a little strip of sort of lowland and green riverland. That is the Jordan Valley with the Jordan River. It leads directly to the Sea of Galilee, which is essentially the only large inland river, the only large inland lake other than the Dead Sea, obviously. And this is sort of the edge of the AO. It's the edge of the Flot, so it's where most activity happens. And right now we're right over Ramat David. So where would you see the Sea of Galilee from Ramat David? It's your 2 o'clock. We're gonna use the Sea of Galilee as a visual rejoin point, and we're also going to use it sort of as a reference to where the Flot is. To the left, or to the west of the Sea of Galilee is, it's a mountain range. They're basically called the Galilee Mountains, or the Galilee Foothills. There's Lower Galilee and Upper Galilee. Lower Galilee is basically, well, it's essentially like this right here, these hills just northwest of Ramat David. North of that, they get a little hillier, a little more mountainous, and that's called Upper Galilee. So I'm going to unpause here. We're passing Lower Galilee on my 10 o'clock. You can basically see where it starts, where the greenery turns into mountains and desert. And on my nose, we are approaching the Sea of Galilee, also known again as Lake Tiberias. In most flights, this will be your rejoin point. This will be the point where you go if you get lost, or if you need to rejoin with your wingman in the middle of a dogfight. You would flow on the Sea of Galilee. And again, to the east of that lowland there, that little river, sort of wetland, to the east of that is Jordan, which is a neutral country. To the east of the Sea of Galilee is a hilly, sort of plateaued area called the Golan Heights, which is hostile. It's occupied by Syria. And again, you can see here, this is Lower Galilee, which is on the sort of left or the west side of the Sea of Galilee, and it goes up to a little higher ground, which is called Upper Galilee. Now I want us to get a very good visual reference on the Sea of Galilee here. So on the western side here, this little village and town right here, that's called Tiberias. And this is the Sea of Galilee itself, sort of an oblong sphere. And it has a few visual references that you can use other than Tiberias. There's the T-junction on the northern side that has a bridge. A bridge out at the news for a reference. There's also a T-junction on the western side that right here that is also a smaller bridge. But ultimately, if you just say, hey, I'm on the west side of the Sea of Galilee, I'm in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, I'm on the east side, I'm on the north side, that's usually good enough to find your wingman, because it has very good sight lines of visibility here. And again, remember, on the east side here, what do we have? That is the Golan Heights. That's enemy territory, plateauing up to Damascus, which is the capital. You see now overflying the Sea of Galilee. If you look sort of around, you'll see that there's a T-junction here. And if I fly closer, you'll be able to make out the bridge. It's often a good visual IP for doing runs into our next landmark, which we'll explain in a second. This green valley leading from the Sea of Galilee to the right of Upper Galilee, which is the mountains and hills that I'm looking at now to my 10 o'clock. To the right of that is the Hula Valley. And this is a portion of Israel that juts north in a salient towards Lebanon on the left and Syria on the right. This green valley that I'm looking at now, sort of marked in the middle by that blue little farmer lake or pond. This is the Hula Valley. This is the northern extent of Israel. And if you, it's terminated to the northeast by this prominent ridge here, which you can see in the distance, called Mount Hermon, and that is the northernmost Israeli settlement. You can see here there's sort of a desert patch leading on the west side of Upper Galilee, and that is where Lebanon starts. Lebanon is occupied by Syria in the campaign. Anything west of there is Lebanon. So you can sort of see there's like a mountainous top there. West of that is Lebanon. I'd like to call our attention to the T-junction here at the north side of the Sea of Galilee. You'll see there, I'm just going to track visually to it. See the T-junction from altitude. Now I'm going to zoom in. You see the bridge, set of two bridges there. These roads, this is like the major junction leading to the Hula Valley and west towards deeper into Israel. And it's often the main axis of movement for enemy troops and friendly troops. Again, to our right, to our 3 o'clock, the Golan Heights, sloping upwards towards Damascus to 2 o'clock. Down here, in this very green area, this is the Hula Valley. Again, friendly territory. And you know, most of this ingress direction is leading to our main part of the AO, and that's why I'm going over this so much. This is where the flot will be, and this is where a lot of engagements will be. So you need to visually be able to identify these areas. If I look behind me, you can see the Sea of Galilee there. It's always present. It's always available as a visual reference. I'm sort of overflying Upper Galilee right now, which is, again, the hilly, mountainous areas bordering Lebanon and Israel. You can see, again, this green sort of depression here. The Hula Valley leading, again, if I look behind me, to the Sea of Galilee. You see there, that is Lower Galilee, sort of the southern part of the mountains that are bordering, sort of bordering the Sea of Galilee. And if I head west now, we'll start to head into Lebanon. You can sort of see there's a pretty clear demarcation here. Everything sort of northwest of this sort of deserty, mountainous area, and leading again to this green, that is Lebanon. So the green strip north of Upper Galilee, or northwest of Upper Galilee, that is Lebanon. There's not going to be much enemy there. There's probably be some infantry and some light air defense, but there won't be much other than that. And if I look to my east again, you can see the Hula Valley from Lebanon, essentially, because I'm starting to enter Lebanon now. Very distinctive. And again, if you look to the south of that, you'll see the Sea of Galilee. That is our main reference point. You'll see to the northeast of the Hula Valley, you will see Mount Hermon, which is that very prominent mountain peak that I'm looking at right now. And on the east side of that, if we were to continue, we would be upon Damascus, which is the enemy capital. Again, you see this very sort of distinct mountain line. This is essentially where Lebanon starts. Lebanon starts right, I essentially am entering Lebanon right now. And we'll begin to flow. This will be a very, very common ingress route leading up to our main AO, the main thing that we're actually going to be attacking, which is the Bekka Valley. The Bekka Valley leads directly into the deep part of Syria. Unfortunately, it's heavily defended by SA6s and SA3s. We're going to now introduce two, again, so I just want to look around so we can see where we are. The Hula Valley, Upper Galilee, sort of Lebanon on my left, and now we're entering the Bekka Valley, the southwestern terminus of the Bekka Valley. What you'll notice about the Bekka Valley is that it has two mountain ranges, one to the west, one to the east. To the east, we have what are known as the anti-Lebanon mountains, which sort of start with Mount Hermon and they go north from there and they get sort of prominent. On the west side, you have the Lebanon mountains, or Mount Lebanon, which start about here, and then they continue. So entering the valley now, it starts to become much more of a obvious valley, much more visually identifiable once we sort of get in a little bit further. But this valley will lead deeper into Syria, so we'll be probably pushing through here, suppressing the air defenses, and then attacking into Syria proper. Again, the Hula Valley leading to the Sea of Galilee. Again, the northeast of the Hula Valley is Mount Hermon, this very prominent peak right here. If I were to continue going that way, I would find Damascus, the enemy capital. Now, to my left, 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, that is the Mount Lebanon mountain range, and we're entering the valley on my nose, the Bekka Valley on my nose. We would not be approaching from this direction because we would get fucked up by air defenses. There's going to be air defenses all in these installations that are along the valley. SA6s and SA3s. However, we'd be attacking from the direction that I'm facing now, most likely. We'd be attacking from the west, basically flying in from the green areas that are by what now? Remember, Lebanon. Lebanon is to our west. We'll be coming in through the terrain, the hilly areas and the semi-mountainous areas leading from Lebanon, coming over these mountaintops here, and then lofting bombs onto SA6s that are defending facilities in the Bekka Valley. We're now in the heart of the Bekka Valley. If I look to my right, 3 o'clock, we see the anti-Lebanon mountains, basically starting from there and going north. They're not as steep and as sort of distinct as Mount Lebanon, which is a little bit more steep. That sort of flat top there, but very high, that is Mount Lebanon itself. And this flat depression here is Bekka. And this area, it allows you to basically fly deep, deep, deep into Syria and go around the flank, but it's heavily defended. So there's going to be SA6s in here. This urban center here, I sort of forget the name of it, but this urban center is very distinctive, and it's always to the east of it. You'll always note that there's a air base here. This is the heart of the Bekka Valley. This is where most of the air defenses are, and it's where we'll have the most work to do.
Altitude.
There'll be SA6s here. There'll be SA6s on the air base. There'll be SA6s on the radar and army bases to the east of it. And again, we'll work this area by lofting over the mountains and by using anti-radiation missiles. To the east, again, we have the anti-Lebanon mountains. And then if we continue east, we get to Damascus, which is a much different terrain. It's essentially a flat desert and it's nothing like what we have here, which is very mountainous and lots of terrain to mask behind. If you go beyond those mountains there that I'm looking, you'll see a very large urban sprawl, which is Damascus, and it's very flat. There is nowhere to hide, and you're going to be in trouble. So we'll start heading east over there now. If I look back over my shoulder here, so right now I'm essentially heading east, about to start overflying the anti-Lebanon mountains. If I look south, which is essentially where I'm looking now, this is the Bekka Valley leading from here up to there, and where that greenery starts is where it is back towards Israel. So flying now, you will start to see in the distance a very, very large urban sprawl. And again, I'm overflying here. What is the name of this mountain range? Anti-Lebanese mountains. They're not as steep, but there will be SA-6s defending some of the low valleys here and some of the roads here. As I head east, I start to approach Damascus. Very large urban sprawl. You'll start to get spiked by numerous SA-2s and SA-3s at this point. Damascus, also very easy to visually identify. You'll see that leading up to Damascus, there is some hills. These are sort of the eastern extent of the anti-Lebanon mountains. But when you get to actually like out of that, it's completely flat. So from essentially where that greenery stops eastward, it is a flat desert. And again, I'm looking back over my shoulder here to my right, 3 o'clock. What is that, guys? Remember? That's the Bekka Valley. If I look to my 6, you see here that urban center where I said most of those air defenses would be. And if I look across there to the west, what is that? Mount Lebanon, right? And west of that is Lebanon itself. Alright, this is a view that you'll probably see. We'd probably be attacking from this direction. Or more likely even from the northwest of Damascus, which would be essentially from this direction. This is Damascus proper. Many, many buildings, very large urban sprawl. It looks like a splotch of just urban in the middle of a desert. And there are 2 main air bases that we need to be afraid of and be aware of, where there's MiGs in the vicinity of Damascus. If you look to the east of Damascus, there's sort of like this triangular urban sprawl. If you look east of that, you'll see this very large airbase. That is Damascus International. There's no MiGs currently operating out of there, and it's not. I mean, it looks like there's going to be shit coming out of there, but there usually isn't. To the south of that, you have Marj Raoul. This airbase here sort of looks like an L from this angle. MiG-23s out of there and other bandits. Now, to the southeast of the city, in the middle of the desert, is Haq. It's another large airbase within interception range of Damascus, and another vector for bandits. So you basically have bandits coming from the east, south-southeast, and northeast. We won't go over the northeast airbase in this video, but that's another vector to be aware of. Basically, northeast of the Bekka Valley, you'll have bandits coming out of there. From an airbase called Asna Area. You'll have bandits coming out of Marj Raoul here, which I'm taking another look at. It's a single strip airbase, sort of L-shaped from this view. And on my nose, we're flying towards Haq. It's a larger airbase, and I believe has 3 squadrons located at it. You can sort of see it there from the distance, in the distance there, starting to come into view. We're still, I would say, about 20 miles away, so still some ways to go. But look over my shoulder there, there's Damascus. There's Damascus International, civilian airbase. South of that is Marj Raoul. On the nose, we start to see Haq come into view. If we attack this airbase, it will probably be NOE. We probably will not be attacking from this vector, but from the southwest. And again, if I look at the ground, completely flat. Some parts have little rises and berms, but it's pretty much flat. And in the case of like a modern Syria scenario, this shit would be really, really deadly, because the SA-10s and SA-11s would chew us up. So yeah, to my 10 o'clock now, we see Calhall Lock. Its visual references include many hamlets surrounding it. It sort of looks, actually it's pretty obvious to see, even from low or high altitude. There are 3 distinctive sort of like hamlets around it, and there's even a hamlet that's right on the south side of it, bordering it parallel to the south. Looks like some compounds there, very distinctive to see. Okay, heading back to Egypt now. We've completed our mission, we've completed our strike. Remember, just head west until you enter what? Anti-Lebanon Mountains. And from there, you'll enter the Hula Valley. From the Hula Valley, go to the Sea of Galilee. From the Sea of Galilee, egress southwest towards Ramat David and beyond to Sde Dov. Just going to kick in the burner here just to go a little bit faster. But you'll start, again, you see Damascus there. The large urban sprawl in the distance. You have the desert here leading to Damascus. This hilly plateaued area, do you remember what that was called? Golan Heights. To the north of the Golan Heights is what? Mount Hermon, the anti-Lebanon Mountains. So you can see there's a ridge line leading into a valley. What valley would that be? That is the Bekka Valley. On the other side of this ridge line, see that prominent ridge line? On the other side of that ridge line is the Bekka Valley. We're not going to re-enter the Bekka Valley, but I just want you guys to be aware of where it is. And if we continue west, across the anti-Lebanon Mountains into the Bekka Valley, we continue west to Mount Lebanon. If we continue west of that, we go into Lebanon. Which, remember, it's a green strip by the coast. So from this angle, what do we see? What do we see? We see a large lake. Could that be the Sea of Galilee? Looks like an ocean from this distance, but that's definitely the Sea of Galilee. We're overflying the Golan Heights right now. It means we're east of what? East of what? Well, I see this green valley here, low-hanging valley, sort of low-elevation valley. That's the Hula Valley. And there's our friendly little retention pond in the middle of the valley to let us know that we're on track. That must mean that we're northeast of the Hula Valley, which means that we're probably overflying Mount Hermon right now. Fun fact, during the war, Mount Hermon had direct eyes. You can see the little Mount Hermon compound there. It had direct line of sight on Damascus and could visually identify bandits taking off from Damascus, which led to Syrian special forces taking Mount Hermon, at least in the Golan Heights conflict, the Yom Kippur War. Alright, so we're headed east into the Hula Valley, and often you wouldn't be at this altitude at this point. You'd be really low, you'd be terrain masking, and you'd be trying to get your ass the hell out of Dodge. See here again, the anti-Lebanon Mountains. To the west of that, we start to see the opening in the Bekka Valley. And to the west of that, we see Mount Lebanon. Beyond that, the ocean. You can actually see the ocean from here. If you look into the distance there to the west, you can see the outline of the ocean. Always look west. If you're lost, go to the ocean. But if you can find the Hula Valley, that's better because it's friendly. And you can get out pretty safely and away. So we're going to be entering the Hula Valley now. Golan Heights. to the east, and to the west, Upper Galilee, to the southwest, Lower Galilee, and to the, I guess, due south is the Sea of Galilee. So again, we can reference those points. We can say, okay, I'm in the Hula Valley, and I'm just north of the Sea of Galilee. So guys, that was pretty much most of the AO. There's a lot more, but these are the main visual reference points that you'll need to know in order to survive while on operations in 80s ITO. Alright, gents, the next thing we're going to go over are lofting attacks. Lofting attacks allow you to actually toss a bomb from behind hard concealment and thus avoid the air defenses that are very common in the 80s. Since we don't have very effective anti-radiation missiles, this is an essential tactic in order to survive in a high threat environment. So what we have here is we have a SA-6, very deadly medium range SAM, defending a sort of radio comm base. Also has infantry battalion with man pads guarding it, and a AAA battalion. So a target like this is going to be pretty hard to attack frontally or from medium altitude. It'll result in, you know, likely a shoot down on your aircraft. So what we're going to do is we're going to attack using a lofting profile from the northwest. We're right over the Lebanon mountain. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the radar itself on the SA-6 to a target steer point. We're going to use target steer point 15 for the actual radar. I'm also marking a few other actual launchers as target steer points. In order to do a lofting attack like this, sort of pre-planned, you do need to have a recon of the target. Otherwise, you know, something like this, you can't really do ad hoc unless you have a steer point that you can create on the fly. For an ad hoc sort of loft, you'd probably use a mode like DTOS. So another key point here is you need to understand and identify an attack geometry for the loft. So what I've done is I've looked west of the mountains here. Okay, so to the east you have the launcher itself and the SA-6 battalion. Here I'm essentially trying to visualize in my head a visual IP. So you can see here there's this L-shaped road with the first junction, and then if we pan back to the east, there's another junction there with a town. This is going to be my visual route that I prepare for mentally in order to do this lofting attack. Also have 4 CBU 52s, centerline tank, 2 AIM-9 Limas. So now that we're in, the first thing we need to do is set up, okay? And what you need to set up is your arming delay, burst altitude, and release angle. The more extreme the release angle, the more you're going to have to pitch up in order to deliver your ordnance. However,
altitude.
a extreme release angle also allows you to sort of loft further and from beyond more terrain. And on the way to the target, when you're doing a pre-planned lofting attack, you definitely want to remain NOE and remain in the weeds. You reference the steer points leading up to the IP.
Altitude.
You can stay in CCRP mode, and as we get to the target, so our IP is like steer point 5. Once we get closer to the target, I'm going to start talking about the procedures that we're going to do in order to attack. The procedures are going to be as follows. We're going to essentially turn from the visual IP onto our target steer point. We're going to remain in CCRP mode.
Pull up.
We're going to get a Q, which is a circle. When the circle starts flashing, that's a loft Q. And at that point, we're going to pull up. We're going to turn the afterburner on, and we're going to pull up steady 3 to 4 Gs up to the release angle. It has to be a straight pull. You can see here we're passing the visual IP. This is the valley. So I'm going to switch to the target steer point. I'm going to turn right. Here's my visual IP here, the first crossroads. To my 1 o'clock there, you'll see the second town. And from this point on, there's our sort of snaking route. I'm going to pull onto final attack heading, which is referencing the target. And on the bottom right, 2 seconds to the loft queue. That's the loft queue there, the circle. I'm going to pull up straight, 3 to 4 Gs. Holding down pickle now, holding down pickle to the release angle. Bombs away. Then you want to do a max G, max G dive. Keep in mind 5.5 Gs for a Cat 3 configuration, which was with bombs. You also want to check that you're not overspeeding, so anything above 550 knots is going to be an overspeed situation. You may have to deploy brakes, and you'll have to carefully manage your throttle. And then we're going to go back into the valley. We're going to reference a visual IP, and we can do a re-attack. And when we do our re-attacks, we probably want to offset from the IP by a couple of degrees, 10 or 5 degrees left or right. This way we can sort of overwhelm the enemy air defenses. They're not prepared for the same attack angle. You can see here, to my 10 o'clock, passing the visual IP again, and just thinking now about how I'm going to attack the target from a different angle, slightly different angle. In some situations, you can't change the angle at all, and unless it's been briefed, you shouldn't. And that's because there could be other air defenses adjacent to the visual IP, especially in the 80s. And sort of deviating from the flight plan may result in sort of pop-up mud that could be a major issue for you. So I'm rolling on to final again, and again, the bottom right of the HUD there tells us we're 10 seconds to the loft queue. You'll see the fall line come. When the fall line first comes down, that's the lofting queue there, that circle. And then we just pull up 3 to 4 Gs straight into the fall line and into our release angle. Bombs away. And again, nose low slice, check your throttle, check your Gs, come down back into cover as quickly as possible.
Pull up, pull up, pull up, pull up, pull up, pull up, pull up.
We're exposed to enemy air defenses for at most 4 or 5 seconds. You can minimize that exposure by selecting terrain that has a very steep angle and increasing the release angle of your actual loft. Now, you know, if you're in a very heavy jet and you set a 45 or 50 degree release angle, it's going to be pretty hard to complete that loft. So just remember, you have to stay in the burner. Keep your speed up when you're in the loft, and then you need to pull those 3.5, 4 Gs in order to release. Accordingly, I recommend lofting with a very light jet. One more attack here, off axis now to the southwest. Again, picking up the speed here. You almost want to be near max speed as you roll onto final, and then you really want to slam on the burner once you're on final here. Look for that fall line. Once the fall line gets near the flight path marker, you're going to see the first loft queue. There it is. Now I can pull up very smoothly to the release angle. Bombs away. Get a AAA spike, but he's not going to be a factor. We're going to get down before he's able to engage us. And if this was a realistic, if this was a realistic scenario, we wouldn't be doing multiple re-attacks. We'd probably just attack once, and that would be the end of it. But for purposes of the video, we're going to do multiple passes just to show different attack aspects. So maybe we learn something by watching the action in attack view. You can see here, we're on final and terrain masking towards the target. Beirut's to our 10 o'clock, and here the visual IP, the valley with the road in it leading directly to the target. You can see here where my pointer is going, that's essentially going to be our attack vector. And now a right turn rolling onto final. You can see on the target itself there is a lot of mud here. We have a couple infantry battalions, lots of man pads, interlocking rings of air defenses and a AAA battalion. All those rings are different threats. Jumping back to our attack run, you can see here we're about 5.5 miles to the target. Five miles. Bomb away at 4.5 miles. Now hard G turn, nose low, into cover. We're able to escape before any defenses are fired at us. See the bomb here, approaching the target, and we're already off clean with no threats. Meanwhile, I'm reapproaching the visual IP and preparing for a reattack. The enemy scattering, but not before I've destroyed the SA-6's radar. And again, we find our visual IP, and then we attack again. So you're offsetting to the north a little bit for the second reattack, but that's okay. Pop. Bomb away. And another hard G maximum speed slice down towards the earth. We're outside of the range of all the air defenses, as you can see here. The closest air defense bubble is here. We're well outside of that range. Bomb is gliding on its way. And we're safe. Another SA-6 destroyed. Another thing we're going to go over is the DTOS bombing mode. It's one of the standard bombing modes along with CCIP and CCRP. It's a visual bombing mode that allows you to attack something that you have a tally on, but you don't quite have the attack geometry available that you would for a CCIP approach. So you can see here, I'm nose down, I'm slewing the TD box using the cursor onto a armored column that I've got a tally on, and then once I've designated with TMS up, I can pretty much treat this like a CCRP attack. So in this case, I'm just going to do a level CCRP release. I have pickle right now, fall line's coming down, and we're 12 seconds to release. Now, the advantage here versus CCRP is that I didn't need a steer point, and I didn't need a radar contact. Just by slewing a TD box onto the target, I've been able to essentially decide how I want to attack that target rather than have to come in nose straight at it with a very long slant range as I would with CCIP. Thus, I'd be losing altitude and going within threat parameters. I often find that when I use DTOS, it can turn into a bit of a loft. If you do a nose-low aspect in order to get a tally on your target and designate them, sometimes you have to pull up into the fall line and turn into a loft, otherwise, to avoid a overshoot. That's perfectly fine. I find that DTOS is extremely powerful for engaging something when you just don't have the correct geometry for a CCIP approach. Like here, I'm noting some armored columns to my left 9 o'clock low. I'm visually getting a tally on them. If I were to run them with CCIP here, I might overshoot the target. I might get too low. I want to stay above 10,000 ATL at all times to avoid man pads and AAA. So I'm really getting a good look at them now, and then I'm going to perform a maneuver here, which almost looks like what you do in a pop-up attack, where you roll the canopy over and then level off onto final, except I'm not actually attacking, I'm just designating. So you can see here, move the TD box very quickly onto a target, and then I'm holding down pickle right here and pulling up into the fall line, lofting the bomb at about 3 miles. If I were to remain level there, I probably would have overshot the target. So,
Flare.
but you can see there, I never went below 10,000. In fact, in that run, I don't think I went below 13 or 14,000. And that's the way to do it. You have to stay above 10,000 in the 80s, and pretty much flying in general. If you go below that, at any time, there's a chance you can get hit by a guy with an AK, and he's gonna kill your jet. I think that, to just compare it to CCIP again, I think CCIP is very good if the target is right on your nose and it's close. But in the case of DTOS, you see how I'm looking way off bore sight? I'm looking way off the center of the jet, and I can still find something visually and bomb it. That's the advantage of DTOS.
Flying right over the road, south to north.
Here I am trying to guide some element leader here onto the target, but he's unable to make a tally, so I actually run in again with my last bomb. You can see there at the left 10 o'clock, there's some burning vehicles, and I do pretty much the same maneuver. I sort of kick in the burner, get a slight elevation gain, and then I roll the jet over and designate the target using the target designator box. Then TMS up to designate, pull up into the fall line while holding the pickle button. If it was a little bit further away and had a little bit more of a slant range, I could do a level attack if I wanted to. So about 40 degrees nose down here, pretty aggressive dive, and I was afraid I would break the hard deck, but I didn't. And then I'm deploying flares just for potential, a manpad could be fired at around 10,000. Especially with the SA-16 or SA-9, you would definitely get around 14,000. So I'm just deploying some flares here, more than usual, checking my handiwork, and target's destroyed.
You guys telling my splashes? So look, run in from steer 7 and just head directly north, and it should be really easy to attack those guys. I'll walk you onto